All right, welcome to the Explainer. We usually think of faith and reason as being on completely opposite teams, right? But what if I told you there's an argument that it's actually logical to need divine guidance to make sense of our world? Today, we're going to break down that exact idea, the rational necessity of revelation.
So let's jump right in with the big question this entire argument is built around. Just think about the tools you're born with, your senses, your mind. Are they really enough to figure out the big stuff, like why you're even here? The line of reasoning we're exploring today starts with a pretty bold idea that our life here, well, it's basically a test. And to pass this test, we've got two fundamental tasks to tackle.
Okay, so what are these big jobs we're supposed to do? First, we have to interact with the world around us. Use everything in the universe the right way. But the second part is absolutely crucial. We have to do all of that while following the commands of the Creator. You can kind of see how you can't really have one without the other.
Right, but to pull any of this off, you need one essential thing, and that's knowledge. And we're not just talking about scientific knowledge of how the world works. We're talking about a deeper knowledge of what the Creator actually wants. So the question is, how do we get it? Well, according to this line of thought, we're actually given a whole toolkit for this. It's a toolkit for getting all the knowledge we could ever need, and it comes with three very distinct tools. And these tools, they kind of work in a hierarchy, one building on top of the other. At the very bottom, you've got your five senses, what you can see, hear, touch, and all that. Then, built on top of that is your intellect, your ability to use reason and logic. And then at the very top, giving us the answers the other two can't, is revelation. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. The idea is that each of these tools has its own job and its own limits. They're designed so that when one tool hits a wall and can't go any further, the next one is supposed to step in and take over. To make this super clear, the argument uses a really simple but honestly a pretty brilliant analogy. Just imagine you're standing in front of a plain old wall. So your senses, right, your eyes, your hands, they can tell you a bunch of stuff. They tell you the wall is white, that its texture is rough. But your senses have no way of telling you how it got there. That's a job for your intellect. Your reason kicks in and tells you, hey, walls don't just pop into existence. Someone had to have built this thing for some reason. But then we hit a wall, literally and figuratively. There's a question that neither of those first two tools can answer. How are we supposed to use this wall in a way that pleases its creator? Your senses are totally silent on that. And your intellect, it can only guess. It can tell you there is a creator, but it can't read their mind. And that right there, that's the knowledge gap. And this is the exact spot where the third tool, revelation, comes into the picture. It's presented as the one thing specifically designed to fill that very gap in our understanding. So what exactly is revelation in this context? Well, it's defined as direct communication from God to humanity, and it's delivered through a chosen prophet. Think of it this way. Its whole job is to answer those big why questions about purpose and morality, the very things our senses and our own reason can't figure out on their own. Yeah, and the argument is super clear about this. Because revelation answers the questions of why are we here and how should we live, questions that our senses and reason just can't touch, it gets placed at the very top. It's considered the highest, most essential source of knowledge we have. But hold on, because the argument takes this one giant leap further. It doesn't just present revelation as a religious idea you have to accept on faith, it positions it as the only logical conclusion if you accept that first idea, that there's a wise, purposeful creator. A rational necessity. I mean, wow, that's a pretty bold phrase, right? It's basically saying it's illogical not to expect revelation. So how on earth does something we usually link with faith get framed as a logical must-have? Okay, so the logic here is explained with another great analogy. Imagine you send a servant or an employee, whatever, on a super important mission. Would you just send them off without giving them any instructions? Without even telling them what the mission is? Of course not. It'd be absurd. I mean, doing something like that would be totally illogical. Just bad management. So the argument goes, if a regular person wouldn't do something that makes no sense, why would an all-wise creator do exactly that with all of us? It would contradict the very idea of that creator being wise. And this is how the whole argument kind of clicks into place like a set of dominoes. If you believe a wise creator made us for a purpose and that we are part of that purpose, then it only makes sense that this creator must have given us some kind of user manual, some instructions. Therefore, a system for guidance has to exist. And in this argument, that system is revelation. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most powerful point of this whole argument. You see, from this perspective, denying the need for revelation isn't just saying, I don't believe. It's actually a logical contradiction. It's like saying, sure, the Creator is wise and gave us a purpose, but was unwise enough to leave us totally in the dark about what it is. So, after all that, what are we left with? What does this mean for our own reason and intellect? Well, this argument isn't saying we should throw reason out the window, not at all. Instead, it gives reason a very specific and very important job: to lead us right up to the edge of its own limits. It's like reason's job is to be the guide that walks you right up to a door that it doesn't have the key for. And that, right there, is where revelation is supposed to step in,